The lobby smelled like lemon disinfectant and overcooked vegetables. A television mounted in the corner was playing some daytime court show too loudly, the kind where everyone is always shouting. A woman in a wheelchair dozed near the window, her chin resting on her chest. Somewhere down the hallway, a call bell kept chiming. And my son, Daniel, was gone. At first, I told myself not to overthink it. Daniel had stepped outside to take a quick call. That's what he said, anyway. He squeezed my shoulder before he left, real gentle, the way he used to when he was a boy trying to reassure me. "Just a minute, Mom," he'd said. "I'll be right back." That was 43 minutes ago. But I didn't know that yet. Not exactly. I just knew the clock on the wall kept moving, and Daniel wasn't walking back through those doors. I folded my hands tighter over the blue quilt in my lap. I almost hadn't brought it. That morning, when Daniel came to pick me up from his house in Columbus, I was standing by the front door with my purse when I saw the quilt draped over the back of the couch. It's an old thing, faded navy squares, hand-stitched, a little crooked in places. I made it the year Daniel turned 10. Funny, the things you hold on to. "Mom, you ready?" he called from the driveway. "Just a second," I answered, though I didn't know why I suddenly felt the need to grab it. Now, sitting in that nursing home lobby, though I didn't fully understand that part yet, I kept smoothing the edge of that quilt between my fingers, like it might tell me what was going on. That's when the woman at the front desk looked up at me with a polite little smile. "Mrs. Carter?" she said. I straightened a bit. "Yes?" Her fingers hovered over a clipboard. "We're just waiting on a few final items for your intake." My intake? The words didn't land right. "I'm sorry," I said, giving a small laugh. "I think there's been a mix-up. My son just brought me for an appointment." Her smile didn't disappear, but it changed, just slightly. The way people's smiles do when they're not sure what to say next. "Oh," she said gently, "let me check your file again." That was the first moment, though I didn't fully admit it to myself, that something inside my chest tightened. Because here's the thing about being 72 years old. You notice tones, pauses, the way people avoid your eyes. While she clicked around on her computer, I glanced toward the glass doors Daniel had walked through. Still no sign of him. Outside, the February sky hung low and gray over the parking lot. I could see his silver Honda sitting exactly where he'd parked it, but there was no movement, no familiar tall figure pacing with his phone pressed to his ear. Just stillness. I shifted in my chair, my hip already starting to ache. Getting old isn't for the weak, let me tell you. 2 years ago, after that little fall in my kitchen, Daniel insisted I move in with him and his wife, Melissa. "Just until you're steadier, Mom," he'd said back then. And to be fair, I had needed the help. The stairs at my old townhouse were getting harder. My Social Security check didn't stretch the way it used to. Groceries alone these days could make a grown woman sit down and sigh. So I agreed. I sold the townhouse, used some of the money to help Daniel catch up on his mortgage when things got tight during the pandemic. The rest I tucked away carefully. I've always been careful with money. You don't raise a child mostly on your own without learning that skill. The receptionist cleared her throat softly, pulling me back to the present. "Mrs. Carter," she said, her voice careful now, "your son completed your admission forms online this morning." Admission? The word landed heavier this time. I blinked at her. Admission to what? There was a pause, not a long one, but long enough. And that's when I felt the first real crack form in my chest. Because deep down, though I didn't want to say it yet, I was starting to understand that this might not be a doctor's office at all. And Daniel still wasn't coming back. I kept looking at those glass doors like if I stared hard enough, Daniel would walk back through them. You know how the mind works when it doesn't want to accept something. It bargains, it explains things away. Maybe he got stuck on the phone. Maybe he ran to move the car. Maybe... But the longer I sat there, the quieter those excuses became. The receptionist, her name tag said Brenda, clicked her mouse a few more times, then looked back at me with a softness that made my stomach turn. "Mrs. Carter," she said gently, "this is Evergreen Care Residence. Your son arranged for your stay beginning today." Stay. Not visit. Not appointment. Stay. For a moment, the room felt like it tilted sideways. I tightened my grip on the blue quilt, my fingers pressing into the familiar stitching like I needed something solid to hold on to. "I think..." My voice came out thinner than I expected. I cleared my throat. "I think you must have the wrong person." Brenda's expression didn't change much, but her eyes did. There was recognition there. And something else. Pity. She turned the monitor slightly toward herself again. "Your son, Daniel Carter, is listed as your primary contact. He signed the intake forms electronically at 8:12 this morning." 8:12. That was right around the time he'd been pouring my coffee in the kitchen. My chest tightened. I remembered that morning clearly now. Too clearly. Daniel had been quiet. Not cold, not rude, just careful. Like every word he said had already been practiced somewhere else. "You sleep okay, Mom?" he'd asked without really looking at me. "I did," I told him, "though that mattress of yours still isn't my favorite." Normally, he would have chuckled at that, teased me a little. That morning, he just nodded. Now, sitting in that chair, the memory made my skin prickle. "I'd like to call my son," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Of course," Brenda replied quickly. "Take your time." She slid a cordless phone across the counter toward me. My hands weren't shaking yet, not visibly, anyway. I dialed Daniel's number from memory. After all these years, some things you don't forget. It rang. Once, twice, 3 times. Then voicemail. "Hey, it's Daniel. Leave a message." I didn't leave one. I hung up slowly and stared at the phone in my hand like it had personally betrayed me. That's when I noticed the woman standing a few feet away, watching me with quiet concern. She wore light blue scrubs and had warm brown eyes and silver streaks in her dark hair pulled into a bun. Her badge read, "Denise, Resident Care." She stepped a little closer, her voice low and gentle. "Ma'am, would you like a glass of water?" It was such a small kindness, and for some reason, that's what made my throat tighten. "Yes," I said softly. "Thank you." While she went to get it, I sat there trying very hard not to let my thoughts run too far ahead of me, because if I let them, I was afraid of where they might land. Denise returned and handed me a small paper cup. Our fingers brushed, and she must have felt how cold my hand was. "You're not the first one who's been confused on the first day," she said carefully. Confused. Such a gentle word for something that felt like my world was quietly cracking open. "I wasn't told," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Denise's expression softened even more. "I figured," she said. We sat in silence for a moment, the TV in the corner filling the space with distant courtroom shouting. Finally, I spoke again. "My son said this was a doctor's appointment." Denise didn't answer right away, and that silence told me more than any words could have. I looked back down at the quilt in my lap, smoothing the worn edge. 2 years. I had lived in Daniel's house for 2 years. I helped with groceries every month, paid for most of my own medications, even covered Emma's daycare one summer when Melissa's hours got cut at the dental office. I truly thought, we were making it work. But as I sat there in that bright, too clean lobby, another memory pushed its way forward. Melissa's voice from 3 weeks ago, sharp, tired, whispered in the kitchen when she thought I was asleep upstairs. "We can't keep doing this, Daniel." At the time, I told myself I must have misunderstood. Now, I wasn't so sure. I lifted my eyes slowly toward Brenda at the desk. "Did my son say when he'd be back?" I asked. Brenda hesitated, just for a second. Then she said gently, "There's no return time listed, Mrs. Carter." And that's when the quiet in my chest finally turned into something much heavier. Because deep down, I was starting to realize this might not have been a misunderstanding at all. The moment Brenda said there was no return time listed, something inside me went very, very still. Not loud, not dramatic, just still. Like the moment before a glass finally cracks. I sat there with the phone still in my lap, the blue quilt pooled over my knees, and for the first time in 72 years, I felt something I had never truly felt before. Not fear, not exactly. It was the quiet, sinking feeling of being rearranged. Denise must have seen it happen on my face, because she pulled a chair a little closer and sat beside me instead of hovering like staff usually do. "You don't have to figure everything out this second," she said softly. I gave a small, polite nod, the kind women my age have been trained to give, even when our world is tilting sideways. But my mind had already started doing what it does best, looking backward, searching for the moment I should have understood. And the truth is, there were signs. I just didn't want to see them. 2 years earlier, when I first moved into Daniel's house in Columbus, everything had felt temporary. That's the word he used. "Just until you're steadier, Mom." I remember standing in their guest room that first night, folding my clothes into the dresser Melissa had cleared out. The room smelled faintly like lavender detergent and something else, something tighter, like space being shared that hadn't fully agreed to it. Still, I told myself families adjust. They always do. And for a while, we did. I paid for my own groceries most weeks, slipped money toward the electric bill when winter hit hard, helped with little Emma after preschool, picking her up twice a week so Melissa could keep her hours at the dental office. I wasn't just sitting around. I made sure of that, because when you've spent most of your adult life being careful not to be a burden, that habit doesn't just disappear. Denise shifted slightly beside me, her voice gentle. "Do you have anyone else you'd like to call, Mrs. Carter?" I hesitated, because the honest answer was, not really. My sister passed back in 2016. Church friends had drifted after I sold the townhouse. And Daniel, well, Daniel had always been my emergency contact. I cleared my throat. "I might, but I need to understand something first." Denise nodded, patient. I turned back toward Brenda at the desk. "You said my son completed admission forms?" "Yes, ma'am," Brenda replied carefully. "I'd like to see them." There was a brief pause. Then Brenda gave a small, professional nod and turned her monitor slightly. "Of course." She printed a few pages and walked them over. I took the papers slowly, my fingers already knowing something inside those pages was going to change things. And it did. Right there, halfway down the second page. Durable power of attorney, active. My breath caught. Not because I didn't know what that meant, but because I did, very clearly. My eyes moved down the page, scanning Daniel's name listed as my designated agent. My signature was there too, shaky but unmistakably mine, dated 8 months ago. The memory hit me like cold water. The hospital visit after my fall last spring. The stack of papers the discharge coordinator had walked me through while Daniel stood beside the bed. "It's just precaution stuff, Mom," he'd said gently, "in case you ever need help managing things." And I had trusted him. Of course I had. He was my son. "I see," I whispered, though my chest had started to feel tight in a way I didn't like. Denise leaned slightly closer, her voice careful and respectful. "Power of attorney doesn't mean he can do anything he wants," she said quietly. "It just means he can help make certain decisions if needed." If needed, the words echoed in my head, because nobody had asked me today what I needed. I swallowed slowly and set the papers back into my lap, smoothing the corner against the blue quilt. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Then Denise reached into her pocket and pulled out a small business card. She didn't push it at me, didn't make a big show. She just laid it gently on top of the paperwork. "Sometimes," she said softly, "it helps to talk with someone who specializes in elder law, just so you fully understand your options." I looked down. Margaret Feldman, Esquire, Elder Law Attorney, Columbus, Ohio. My fingers hovered over the card. Options. Such a small word for something that suddenly felt very big. "I don't want to cause trouble," I said quietly. And there it was. The sentence women of my generation have been trained to say our entire lives. Denise's eyes softened, but her voice stayed steady. "Understanding your rights isn't causing trouble." I didn't answer right away, because my mind had already drifted again, this time to a memory I hadn't thought about in years. Daniel at age 10. Standing in our tiny kitchen while I sat at the table with a stack of overdue bills and a calculator that kept sticking on the number 8. "I'll help when I grow up, Mom," he'd said, serious as anything. "You won't have to worry forever." And for most of his life, he hadn't let me down. Which is why sitting there now hurt in a way that's hard to explain unless you've lived long enough to know the difference between strangers disappointing you and your own child doing it. I folded the attorney's card carefully and slipped it into the small zip pocket inside my purse. Not a decision. Not yet. Just information. Denise stood slowly. "I'm on until 6 if you need anything," she said gently. "Thank you," I replied. She gave my shoulder the lightest squeeze before walking back down the hallway. I sat there a long time after that, watching the door, listening to the clock, trying to decide which feeling was heavier, the hurt in my chest or the quiet voice in the back of my mind that kept whispering something I wasn't quite ready to say out loud. Because for the first time that afternoon, I wasn't just confused. I was starting to wonder if this had all been planned much earlier than I ever imagined. And what I discovered later that evening? Well, that's when things truly stopped making sense. By late afternoon, Evergreen Care residents had settled into a kind of quiet rhythm that made my skin itch. Not because anything was wrong on the surface. Everything was polite, orderly, too smooth. Dinner trays rolled past on metal carts. A soft instrumental version of some old country song floated through the hallway speakers. Down the corridor, someone laughed. The brittle kind of laugh that doesn't quite reach the eyes. I sat in the same vinyl chair, my purse now resting firmly in my lap, my fingers touching the edge of Margaret Feldman's business card through the fabric. I still hadn't called. Not yet. Because part of me, the hopeful, stubborn part, kept thinking Daniel would walk back through those doors with an apology and some reasonable explanation that would make all of this make sense. But as the wall clock crept past 4:30, that part of me was getting quieter. Denise reappeared beside me, her steps soft but purposeful. "Mrs. Carter," she said gently, "have you had anything to eat today?" I blinked, pulled out of my thoughts. I had toast this morning. Her mouth tightened just slightly, not judgment, just concern. How about we get you something light from the kitchen? Normally, I would have declined out of pure politeness. That's how I was raised. But today, something inside me felt different. Tired. Yes, I said quietly. That might be nice. She smiled, a real one this time, and disappeared down the hall. While I waited, I finally reached into my purse and pulled out the business card. Margaret Feldman. The name felt solid in my hand. Practical, adult. The kind of name that didn't panic easily. I turned the card over once, twice. Then, before I could talk myself out of it, I pulled out my phone and dialed. It rang only once. Feldman Elder Law, this is Margaret. Her voice was calm, efficient, not unkind. For a second, my throat tightened in that embarrassing way it does when emotions sneak up too fast. Hello, I said, forcing steadiness into my tone. My name is Linda Carter. I was given your number by someone at Evergreen Care. There was a brief pause, the thoughtful kind. Yes, Mrs. Carter, Margaret said gently. How can I help you today? I took a slow breath. Well, I said quietly, I believe I may have been admitted somewhere without fully understanding the situation. Another pause, this one heavier. I see, Margaret said carefully. Are you safe right now? The question surprised me. Yes, I answered quickly. Everyone here has been very kind. That's good, she said. Why don't you tell me what happened, starting from this morning? And so I did. Not all at once, not dramatically, just the facts, the way women my age tend to tell things. The car ride, the paperwork, the power of attorney, Daniel not coming back. Margaret didn't interrupt, didn't rush me. When I finished, she spoke in the same steady tone. Mrs. Carter, having power of attorney allows your son to assist with decisions, but it does not remove your rights unless you've been legally declared incapacitated. Based on what you're describing, you still have full legal agency. The words landed slowly, carefully, like stepping stones across water. I do? I asked. You do, she confirmed. Now, there may be financial or medical factors we'd want to review, but placement in a long-term facility typically requires either consent or documented medical necessity. My grip tightened slightly on the blue quilt. Consent. Nobody had asked for mine today. What would you recommend? I asked quietly. Margaret's answer came without hesitation. I recommend we meet in person as soon as possible and review your documents thoroughly. In the meantime, do not sign anything new without independent advice. You understand? Yes, I whispered. I have an opening tomorrow morning at 10, she added. Can you arrange transportation? Transportation. For the first time all day, I hesitated, because Daniel usually handled that. Margaret must have heard the silence. If needed, she said gently, Evergreen's social coordinator can usually help arrange senior transport services. You don't have to figure everything out tonight. Something in my chest loosened just a little. Thank you, I said softly. After we hung up, I sat very still. The room hadn't changed. The television was still murmuring. The call bells still chimed down the hall, but inside me, something had shifted. Not anger, not yet. Something quieter, stronger. Denise returned just then with a small tray, soup, crackers, and a cup of tea. Well, she said warmly, setting it down beside me, this should help a little. I looked up at her, really looked this time. You gave me the right number, I said. Her lips curved gently. I thought it might be useful. I nodded slowly. Then, after a moment, I asked the question that had been sitting heavy on my chest all afternoon. Denise, Can I ask you something honestly? Of course. I swallowed. Have you seen this happen before? She didn't answer right away, and that hesitation told me everything. Yes, she said quietly. Sometimes families get overwhelmed. Sometimes communication breaks down. And sometimes, she paused carefully, people make decisions faster than they should. I looked back down at the blue quilt in my lap, smoothing the worn stitching. Faster than they should. Maybe that was true. Or maybe, and this thought came sharper than the others, maybe this hadn't been rushed at all. Maybe it had been building quietly for months. Melissa's tight smiles, Daniel's careful tone, the late-night kitchen whispers I wasn't supposed to hear. I lifted my chin slightly. Denise, I said calmly, tomorrow morning I'm meeting with an attorney. Her eyebrows lifted just a fraction. Good, she said softly. For the first time since Daniel drove me here, I believed it might be. But what I didn't know yet, what I couldn't have known sitting there with my soup growing cold and the evening shadows stretching across the lobby, was that the paperwork Margaret was about to uncover would change far more than just where I was living. The next morning, I was sitting in Margaret Feldman's office with my blue quilt folded neatly across my lap and a feeling in my chest I hadn't experienced in a very long time. Clarity. Margaret was exactly how I'd imagined. Calm, sharp-eyed, the kind of woman who read every line twice before she trusted it. She had my paperwork spread neatly across her desk, glasses low on her nose as she reviewed each page. For a while, she didn't say much, just the soft turn of paper, the quiet scratch of her pen. Then finally, she looked up. Mrs. Carter, she said gently, your son does have power of attorney, but based on what I'm seeing, you were never declared medically incapable of making your own living decisions. My hands tightened slightly on the edge of the quilt. So, he couldn't just place me there? Not without your informed consent, she said carefully. And there's something else. That was the moment my stomach dropped. Margaret turned one document toward me. 3 months ago, she said, your son initiated preliminary paperwork to refinance the Columbus home, the one you helped fund. For a second, I couldn't speak. Not because I was shocked, but because, deep down, part of me had already begun to suspect. I see, I said quietly. Margaret's voice softened. I can't tell you what his intentions were, but I can tell you that you have options, including formally limiting his power of attorney moving forward. Options. There was that word again, but this time, it didn't feel scary. It felt steady. By the end of that week, the paperwork was done. My power of attorney was revised. My finances were fully back under my own control. And with Margaret's help, and a kind social coordinator at Evergreen, I secured a small senior apartment on the west side of Columbus. Nothing fancy, just quiet, just mine. The day I moved in, I placed my blue quilt across the foot of my new bed, smoothed the corners the way I always have. It felt right. Daniel did call eventually. His voice was tight, defensive at first, then tired, then something closer to honest. Mom, I didn't know what else to do, he admitted. And you know what? I believed him. Life gets heavy. Bills pile up. Caregiving is harder than most people admit out loud. But I also told him, gently and clearly, next time, Daniel, you talk to me, not around me. We're still finding our way back to each other, slowly, carefully. But I sleep peacefully now in my own space, with my tea exactly how I like it, and my dignity fully intact. Because sometimes, the strongest thing a mother can do is quietly take her life back. If this story touched something in your heart, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe. And I'd truly love to hear from you. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from and whether you've ever faced a moment that tested your quiet strength. Your stories matter more than you know.